Hey guys, it's Matt here, and I'm making this video for the RIT Intro to Web Week 2 lab that I'll be missing. I'm sorry that I'll be missing that class this week, but I do care about you guys and wanted you to, didn't want you to fall behind, so I'm making you this video. And today I'm going to show you how to set up your Photoshop document. So that you can have a good foundation for this project's wireframes, your design, and all the future projects that you'll need to do pretty much anytime you're designing for the web. And then I want to talk a little bit about what different types of wireframes are and again why they're important. But the majority of the class time this week for lab was used, at least in Monday's lab, just for in-class time to work. So this will hopefully be a pretty short video, and then just make sure that you're working on your wireframe for submission on Friday morning. So let's jump into things. I have Photoshop open. I am designing on a Retina display, so I'll make sure that I talk about that in a second here. But basically what you're going to want to do is open up Photoshop and create a new document. We're going to do File, New. We're going to call this something like profile page, and this is important. So if you're on a non-Retina display, which I imagine a lot of you are, unless you have a brand new laptop or a newer laptop anyway, you're going to set your canvas size width to 1140 pixels. That's a pretty safe number. So the idea behind this number, and I'll show you, is that number is derived from browser display statistics. So, as of January 2015, so last year, 97%, which is probably a little high, I would say about 93% of all the people around the world have a screen resolution that's greater than 1024 pixels wide. So it's very safe to design your document or your content width for your website at 1140 pixels. This is what I use for all my client projects. No one has ever complained that they can't see all the content without scrolling left or right. So designing at 1140 will make sure that everyone, or almost everyone, can see all the content on your website without having to scroll left or right. So set that to 1140. Set the height to pretty much whatever you want. You can change that later on. Just something like 800 or 900 to start off with. Then you want to make sure that your resolution is at 72 pixels per inch. That is standard for designing for any kind of digital display. You want to make sure that you are in RGB color. CMYK is for print. RGB is for digital. Background transparent, great. So that should about do it. If you don't want to have to do this every time you create a new document or duplicate an old document, you can save these values as a preset, and then it'll show up here in this drop-down menu. So we'll create this document, and as you can see, this is pretty small, so it doesn't look like I could really design much of a website in this canvas. And the reason is because this canvas is on a Retina display. So 1140 pixels is what you'll design it if you're on a non-Retina display. But for all you Retina users, you're going to have to double the size of everything. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to canvas size. I'm going to go to percent, and then to double it, I'm just going to do 200%. Oh, that was not proportional. So we'll do image size. Constrain percent 200, and this is what we're going to be working with. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Command R to turn on my rulers. I am going to name this something intuitive like main BG for background. Come over here to my paint bucket tool and give this a color. Make sure that your rulers are on, and then you can right-click on the ruler to control the increments or the units. So if yours is in anything but pixels, make sure you right-click on here and change it to pixels. And then what you're going to want to do is drag a guide over to the left edge of your document, and drag a guide over to the right edge of your document. And then you're going to want to go to Image, Canvas Size, and right now this is the content width. This represents how wide your content can be on the website. So right now, if you were to design this, your content would bump up right against the edge of this document over here. So what we're going to have to do is make this a little bit wider so we can kind of understand the context of what we're designing in. So I'm going to do canvas size and width. So I want to make this, what would be 1400 pixels wide, but because I'm on a Retina display, I need to make it 2800 pixels wide. Okay, and you can see what that did. I have the guides here right at my content width, but now I have this extra space and breathing room around the side of the document. So what I'm going to do is just right-click on main BG, hit Command-T to transform this background, and then I'm going to click on this edge, and while I'm doing that, you can see it kind of expands like this, but if I hold Option, now it does both sides proportionally. So I'm going to do that. It'll snap to 2800 pixels wide. If it doesn't, you can click on View and Snap to have it snap to the edges. And then the last thing I'm going to do is hit Command-T again on this shape that we just made bigger, and drag a guide right to the middle. You can see there's these handles, and this represents the exact 1400 pixel middle of the canvas. So it's good to know where the middle of the canvas is at all times. So we're going to do that. And now our document is ready for design. So for example, well, actually, let's save this first. You guys remember that sample project folder I gave you? This would go in the Wireframes folder. So we'll do profile page, save it. Great. So now let's say I wanted to design a page that had, a header across it. I would get my shape tool, not my marquee tool. I want to use vector shapes for this. And I want to make it, 2800 pixels by 150. So that's not exact. Looks like we can change that here. And then just go in and make sure that this is bumped up right against the edge there. Okay, so we can name this, header BG, and then we can double click on this, and we'll just give this a color of gray. And you'll notice that this goes outside of our guidelines here, and that's okay because the background of the navigation or the background of the website can and should usually expand beyond the bounds of your guides. So it's good to see an example of how that works here. But for your content, let's go grab some lorem ipsum text real quick. Lorem ipsum. We'll do a couple paragraphs of this. I'm going to create a space for this paragraph, or a couple paragraphs. And this is where I'm going to keep my content. So then, let's say I have a logo that I want in here, and this is my logo. That logo is also going to go right up against the edge here. And let's say I have some navigation items. So I'll make these a little bit smaller. And then we will duplicate them. And I'll just kind of do this really quick here, and that's pretty ugly. So what I probably want to do is, let's get rid of that one, and then we'll take these four, and we will align them, distribute horizontal centers, and now they're aligned properly. So you can kind of see, now the content, the width of the website is, 1140. But we also have this space to look at out here for kind of context to see how this is going to work on a really wide monitor. So that's kind of how you set up your document. Now, what I want to show you, this is similar looking probably to what you did for your in-class exercise, wireframe an existing website. Those websites were what we call low fidelity. And fidelity, you've probably heard before, it just means the level of detail. So lo-fi, hi-fi, high fidelity, low fidelity. I want to show you some examples of that. So if you just go to Dribble and type in wireframes, you'll get a whole bunch of results. So this would be an example of a low fidelity wireframe. There's really not much detail here. You kind of understand what's going on. Like, there's probably an image, probably some links. It looks like what could be testimonials here in this image. I guess it's an image scroller. It doesn't look much like an image though. Maybe an image with some text over it. And then these, I'm not really sure what these are. I guess these are product galleries. It'll be a title, a little description, and an image. So there's not much detail in the wireframe itself. They really need to use these descriptions on the side to let you know and let their client know, what is going on here. So it's important to remember that when you do a low fidelity wireframe like this, you really already have to have an understanding of what this content is going to be. So like whoever designed this knew that these were going to be products. They knew that it was going to have a title. They knew it was going to have a description. They kind of planned all this out and then just rendered like a really simple version of it, which is great, except if you showed this to a client without any notes on the sides, they would have no idea what you're doing. So I almost think it takes a little bit more effort to do this because you're taking a thing you already have all the details for and doing a really simple version of it. So now let's take a look at like more of a high fidelity wireframe. So this would be definitely more high fidelity. So logo, very clear what that is. There's links, and not just dummy text. There's actual links here, and some of them even have these drop-down labels on them. It's very clear what this section's for. There's going to be a big image represented by these stripes. It's going to have a title. It's going to have a description that can be looks like up to 3 lines. There's a promoted artist section. It will clearly have a title and subtext. So it's pretty obvious what's going on this page. There's some controls here. There's a search box. There's this kind of utility bar up here. So this is more on par with, I think, what you guys want to be doing for your Project 1 wireframes. They don't have to be blue. Grayscale is completely fine. In fact, sometimes I show these to clients and they ask me, is my website going to be blue? Why did you make the whole website blue? And I have to explain that no, it's just a wireframe. We're just focusing on the structure and the layout right now. So grayscale is definitely safe. It's neutral, but these blueprints, quote unquote, can end up looking pretty cool, which definitely adds some pizzazz to your portfolio. So that's kind of low and high fidelity wireframes. So what you want to do, and again, just to reiterate, the amount of work that you have to do in the wireframe stage, or rather in the design stage, depends on how much effort you put into the wireframe. So if you do a really low fidelity wireframe like this, that's fine with me. I don't have a problem with that, except you're going to have a lot more work to do to transfer this into a final design. Whereas if you did this for your wireframe, you would have a lot less work to do. You would basically just have, you'd have to change the layer styles, you'd have to drop your logo in, you might have to get rid of some of these borders on your shapes, but for the most part, you wouldn't have to do a lot of work on this to really get it to its final state. So that's kind of the difference between those. And I think, let me just make sure here. Yep, creating presets, Retina displays. I think low fidelity wireframes, are good when you, I guess, don't have a ton of detail, or really not even low fidelity wireframes. Let's say like sketching. You should probably do something more like this. If you really have no idea what you're doing and you just need to experiment, it's probably easier to do some sketches like this. And then do the wireframe after you kind of have an idea. If you already kind of have an idea of what you're doing, then I would say jump into like the kind of mid to high fidelity wireframes such as this for Project 1. So lastly, just to reiterate, Project 1 is all about you. It's a profile page, just a simple profile page. And it can have like an image of you, maybe some social links, some about text, maybe some images of projects you've worked on, but it doesn't have to be complicated. So try to do a fairly standard, fairly simple layout, maybe with your own kind of flair on it for project one. You are welcome to move ahead on the design after you have the wireframe. And you're welcome to do a multi-page website for your first project, but try not to overwhelm yourself. Which brings me to my last point, converting a wireframe into a design. And this is for those of you who kind of want to move ahead. I'm going to talk about this again on Friday, but basically, let me bring up a project that I did a couple months ago. And we'll go grab this page. It's a wireframe, and then I have the design for this exact wireframe as well. So I just want you to see kind of how this translated over. So this is my wireframe, very high fidelity, very detailed wireframe. Not really much had to change when I transferred it into a design. And I apologize for the fan noise on my computer right now. It's kind of freaking out on me. I don't know why that is, but something to do with the screen recording. Anyway, so if I wanted to translate this wireframe into this design, what I would have to do, let me zoom in here for you guys. All I'd really have to do is come in here and right-click on these layers. Maybe give this a color. Maybe I want it to be, dark gray. Change this input field, to a different color. Maybe it's slightly lighter. Come over here to this shape, maybe get rid of the border around it, give it a color. Maybe I want that color to be white, or maybe even have like a little bit of a gradient on it, so you can kind of see what's going on here. Sample these colors. So we have some text, and then maybe I want to drop an image here. So instead of this circle, I need to put an image in there. Same thing with these squares. They need images, not just squares. So what I'll do is I'll just go grab an image. I'll drop it into Photoshop. And I know I'm going a little bit fast, but you guys can rewatch this video as many times as you want. So I'll kind of just shrink that down, and then I will hit Command and click on the shape layer below it to mask. I'll go over this stuff in more detail on Friday. But that'll put your image in there and mask it to that shape. Maybe this little arrow here, maybe he is not white, maybe he's dark too. And we'll make sure, actually, so for now, since he's a complex shape, let's just do a color overlay on him. And maybe these need to get, a little bit darker. Same thing with this text. I can get a little bit darker. So that's pretty much how I would go about transferring this entire document, into a design. You already have it. The reason why Photoshop is really good for wireframes is because, first of all, it's an industry standard. So if you give a development team or your client a sketch file or an Illustrator file, it's much less likely that they have those two programs or pieces of software than it is Photoshop. Also, Photoshop has a lot of really good tools built into it already for exporting to web. Remember that generate function I showed you, generate image assets. You can go in here and just name your layers, header.png, and generate image assets, and it'll export that. You can even do things, I believe this is the syntax for it, header.png at 2x, and that will render it twice as big, so you can save your files for Retina displays right from here. Yeah, the biggest reason it's Photoshop is an industry standard. Everybody that deals with any kind of design is going to have Photoshop, including some clients and including development teams. So that's a good reason. The other reason is it's easy to transfer over from a wireframe into a design. So that's what we're going to be using for this class. I hope this makes sense. So just as a reminder, check your email for details about Project 1 wireframe submission. Project 1 designs, which is just a little bit of what I started to do here, is not due until next Friday. That would be the 12th, I believe. But this Friday, February 5th, your wireframe, just one wireframe, is due at the beginning of of lecture. So I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you guys in class.